My name is Pip, at least, that's what everyone called me. My full name was Philip Pirrip, but as a child, I couldn't say it properly, so Pip it became, and Pip it stayed. I never knew my parents. I only knew their names from the gravestones in the lonely churchyard near the river. The marshes stretched endlessly around it, flat, gray, and wet. I lived with my sister, Mrs. Joe Gargery, and her husband Joe, the village blacksmith. Mrs. Joe was sharp and strict. She liked to remind me she had brought me up by hand, which meant she used her hands often, to scold, to push, to keep me in line. But Joe was different, big and gentle, his face always warm from the forge fire. He was more than a brother-in-law to me, he was my only friend. Life in our small cottage was hard but honest, days filled with hammering iron, the smell of coal, and the sound of the river in the distance. One cold evening, as the fog rose thick from the river, I stood by my parents' graves. That's when a rough voice behind me shouted, "Hold your noise! Keep still, you little devil, or I'll cut your throat!" I turned in terror. Out of the mist came a man, a convict in torn gray clothes, his face dirty, his leg chained with heavy iron. He was shivering and hungry, and his eyes burned with desperation. He made me promise to bring him food and a file to cut off the chain from his leg. "If you don't," he said, "I'll have your heart and liver out." Shaking with fear, I ran home through the fog, and early next morning, I sneaked into the pantry, stole some bread, meat, and brandy, and took a file from Joe's forge. Then I ran back to the marshes. The convict was still waiting in the freezing mist. When I gave him the food and tools, he looked at me with sudden kindness. "Thank you, dear boy," he said softly. "God bless you!" Our meeting ended there, and a few days later, soldiers came to the forge asking Joe to fix some handcuffs. They were hunting 2 escaped convicts. We followed them out into the marshes, where we found the man I had helped fighting another convict in the mud. When the soldiers took him, the convict whom I had helped earlier said bravely, "I stole the food and file from the blacksmith's house. The boy had nothing to do with it. He was taken away in chains, and I watched him disappear into the fog, never knowing he would return to change my life forever." After this incident, days passed and life went back to the routine of the forge. Joe and I worked together. Mrs. Joe complained and ordered us around. Our world was small, made of smoke, tools, and Sunday walks to church. I thought that was all life had to offer, until one morning when a man named Mr. Pumblechook came to our door. He was a relative of Mrs. Joe, round-faced, proud, and full of self-importance. He sold corn and liked to talk as if he were the wisest man in Kent. That day he brought great news. "Miss Havisham," he said, "the rich lady who lives in town, wants a boy to come and visit her, to play with her adopted daughter. A well-behaved boy of good manners." I told her about our Pip. My sister, Mrs. Joe, nearly dropped her broom. "Miss Havisham!" she exclaimed. "At Satis house. Think of it, Pip, you'll be in a real lady's house. Mind you behave like a gentleman." I had no idea what waited for me, but I was both excited and afraid. That night Mrs. Joe scrubbed me so hard with soap that I thought I'd be washed out of existence. She ironed my best clothes, and early next morning Mr. Pumblechook took me to town. When we reached the great iron gates of Satis house, my stomach twisted with fear and curiosity. The gates creaked open and a dark-faced servant led me through a silent courtyard. The walls were covered in ivy, the windows shut tight, and not a single sound of life came from inside. At the door, I was told to wait. Then came a voice, thin, trembling, and commanding. "Let him in!" I stepped inside. The room was dim, lit only by the pale light of candles. There she sat, Miss Havisham, in a faded wedding gown that had once been white. Her veil hung in tatters from her hair. Her skin was like paper, and the only color in her face came from the jewels still clinging to her fingers. Everything in the room was frozen in time. The furniture was covered with dust. The clocks had all stopped at the same minute, 20 minutes to 9. The moment, I would later learn, when her fiancé left her on her wedding day. On the long table beside her lay a wedding feast turned to ruin. Dried flowers, blackened cake, cobwebs like lace. She turned her head slowly toward me. "Come nearer, boy," she said. "Do you know what time is?" I shook my head. "It has stopped here," she whispered, pressing her hand to her chest. "Look round you. Everything here has stopped." Then she said, "Play, boy. Play while you can. Call Estella." From another door came a girl my own age, Estella. She was beautiful in a way that frightened me, her eyes sharp, her face proud, her voice smooth and cold. She looked at me like I was something to be examined, not greeted. "Play cards with him," Miss Havisham ordered. We sat across from each other at a small table. I fumbled with the cards, nervous, clumsy, unsure. She watched me with quiet amusement. When I called the knaves, "Jacks," she laughed softly and said, "He calls the knaves jacks. And he says coarse hands. What a common little boy he is." I felt my cheeks burn with shame. No one had ever made me feel small before, but Estella's voice did what no blow ever could. I wanted the floor to swallow me. Miss Havisham watched with strange satisfaction. "Do you find her pretty, boy?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," I said quietly. "Do you think she's proud?" "Yes, ma'am." "Love her," Miss Havisham cried suddenly. "Love her! Love her! Love her! If she tears your heart to pieces, but still love her." I didn't understand then that she meant every word. Her bitterness was so deep that she wanted Estella to destroy love itself, just as hers had been destroyed long ago. When Estella led me out after the game, she gave me a piece of cake like one gives a beggar, and when I thanked her, she looked at me with faint disgust. "You should wipe your feet before you come into a lady's house," she said. Outside in the courtyard I began to cry. I cried because I suddenly felt poor, rough, and unworthy. I had never noticed my coarse hands before, or my thick boots, or my simple way of speaking. Now I saw them all too clearly. That night, when I looked at Joe's forge, I no longer saw warmth and safety. I saw shame. Miss Havisham called for me several more times in the following months. Each visit was the same, a strange, dreamlike afternoon where she sat in her decaying gown, the clocks frozen, the light dim, and Estella treating me like something lower than dust. Sometimes Miss Havisham would take my hand and whisper, "Do you admire her still?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then go on admiring her. She will break hearts, and I shall watch and enjoy." As the years passed, I began to believe that Miss Havisham meant to help me, that she would one day make me rich enough to marry Estella. I didn't see that I was only part of her revenge, a child's heart offered to an old woman's bitterness. When I turned 14, Miss Havisham decided she had done enough with me. She told me to bring Joe to her house so she could pay him for my time. Joe arrived, nervous and awkward, his hat twisting in his hands. Miss Havisham gave him 25 guineas for my services and said, "The boy has done well. He may go back to his trade." That was the end. Estella didn't even look at me when I left. But as I walked home that day, the world around me looked dull and gray. I had seen a life far grander than my own, and now I could never forget it. When I looked at my hands, I saw them not as strong or honest but coarse. When I heard Joe's kind, simple voice, it sounded common. And when I lay in bed that night, I whispered to myself the dream that would shape my whole life. I want to be a gentleman." That was how the saddest house changed me forever. Miss Havisham had stopped her clocks, but in that old, airless house, something had started in me, an ache that would not stop ticking for years. Meanwhile, Joe, unaware of the new storm inside me, continued to teach me the blacksmith's work. But my heart was somewhere else, always wandering back to Sada's house, to Estella's face. Mrs. Joe continued to rule the house sharply, until one day, something happened that changed everything. There was a man in the forge named Orlick. He was large, strong, and always angry. Mrs. Joe had often insulted him, and one evening, when she returned from town, Orlick struck her down from behind with an iron tool seeking vengeance. She did not die, but she was never the same. She lost her speech and her strength. The fire in her voice was gone. She became quiet and helpless. And then Biddy came to help care for her. Biddy was a girl my age, gentle, thoughtful, patient. She had soft eyes and a calm way of speaking. She cared for Mrs. Joe with kindness, spoke to Joe with respect, and spoke to me with understanding. Sometimes, I felt something warm and peaceful when I sat with her. Something simple. Something good. But I was blind then. My heart was far away, still chasing Estella. A few months later, as Joe and I were working in the forge, a tall man entered, dressed in dark, expensive clothing, with sharp eyes and a powerful presence. His name was Mr. Jaggers, a well-known lawyer from London. He looked at me directly. "Pip," he said, "I bring news. You have come into a great fortune. A generous benefactor has chosen to raise you up, to educate you as a gentleman in London. You will have an allowance and proper tutors. Your future will be changed completely." The room fell silent. My heart leapt, and I knew. There was only one person it could be. Miss Havisham. Who else would lift a boy like me from the forge? Who else had watched me so closely? Who else had placed Estella in my heart like a flame? In that moment, I believed with certainty that she was preparing me for Estella, that she meant for us to belong to each other one day. I looked at Joe. He smiled, a proud, sad kind of smile, because he knew I was already leaving him in my heart. Mr. Jaggers continued, "You must leave soon. There are conditions. You will keep the name Pip. And you will not ask who your benefactor is. The name is to remain secret for now." I didn't care. In my mind, I already knew the answer. When the day came to leave for London, Joe simply shook my hand, his eyes warm and full of love. "Ever the best of friends, Pip," he said. And I knew, without saying it aloud, that I was leaving behind not just a home, but the person who had loved me most purely in this world. As the coach rolled away, the forge grew smaller and smaller in the distance. I thought greatness was waiting for me in London. I didn't understand yet that greatness can cost the heart everything. When I reached London, it did not look like the shining dream I had imagined. It was loud, busy, and covered in smoke. Carriages rolled through muddy streets, people hurried everywhere, and the river that cut through the city was dark with soot and oil. Mr. Jaggers' office stood like a stone fortress among the chaos, large, cold, and full of serious-looking men. "From today," he said, "you will be under the guidance of my clerk, Mr. Wemmick, and you will reside with the Pocket family for your education." From Jaggers' office, I was taken to the home of Mr. Matthew Pocket, a scholar and tutor who would teach me how to behave like a gentleman. When I arrived at the Pocket household, a young boy opened the door, cheerful, quick, and full of warmth. He smiled instantly when he saw me. His name was Herbert Pocket. It was only after a moment of looking at him closely that we both remembered we had once met long ago in the courtyard of Sada's house, when he and I had foolishly boxed with one another as boys. Herbert was Mr. Pocket's son, and he lived in the house as a student, learning to become a gentleman and preparing himself for a position in the world. From that moment, we became friends, not forced by circumstances, but joined by kindness. Herbert taught me everything about being a gentleman: how to sit, how to talk politely, how to hold a fork, how to walk with confidence, how to bow, even how to smile correctly in company. He never laughed at my mistakes. He corrected me gently, like a brother. Days passed into weeks and weeks into months. I learned fencing, dancing, handwriting, and speaking properly. I learned how to dress, how to order food, how to talk about things I didn't understand without sounding foolish. During these years, whenever Estella returned to London, I went to see her. She had grown more beautiful still, elegant, graceful, always poised, but there was a distance in her, like light seen through glass. She spoke kindly, but without affection. She listened, but without warmth. She allowed my presence, but never reached for it. I did not understand that Miss Havisham had shaped her to be this way, that love had been denied her so that she might not give what Miss Havisham herself had lost. Time passed, debts grew without my noticing, and still I believed that everything was unfolding toward the future I imagined. And I believed, with all my heart, that Miss Havisham had designed this life for me so that one day I would be worthy of Estella. But I did not know that life was preparing something very different for me. One stormy evening, I sat alone in my room. The wind rattled the windows, lightning flashed across the sky, and the rain hit the glass like handfuls of thrown stones. I was thinking of Estella, as always, thinking of her voice, her smile, her distance. Then, knock, knock, knock. A slow, heavy knocking at the door. Not hurried, not polite. I hesitated. When I opened the door, a man stood in the darkness, soaked to the bone, clothes dripping, face worn from years of hardship. His boots were muddy, his hands rough, his hair grayed by time and suffering. But his eyes I remembered. It was the convict, the man I had helped as a child into the marshes. He stepped into the room with a strange familiarity. "You don't know me now," he said, breathing hard from the climb. "But I know you. And I've come a long way to see you, dear boy." My heart pounded. "You," I began, barely able to speak. "You were on the marshes. When I was little. You told me." He said. "I told you I'd have your heart and liver if you didn't bring me food. But you did bring it. You did." He reached into his coat and dropped something heavy onto the table. Money. A bundle of it. And then more. And more, wrapped notes, tied tightly. "I made a fortune," he said quietly. "I sweated for it. I froze for it. I suffered for it. And every coin, every single coin, was for you." My breath stopped. "For me?" I whispered. He nodded, proudly, painfully, lovingly. "For you. To make a gentleman of you. To raise you up higher than any man ever raised a child that wasn't his own." The room went silent. I could not speak. Because in that moment, everything I had believed shattered. Miss Havisham had not lifted me into the world of gentlemen. This man had. The man I had helped out of fear. The man with the iron chain. The criminal. Abel Magwitch. He looked at me with a trembling smile. "You're my gentleman, Pip. My own. That's what I worked for. That's what I lived for." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. The future I had imagined. The love I had dreamed of. The meaning of my life. All shifted. Estella was not meant for me. Miss Havisham had not chosen me. I had been living a dream built upon a misunderstanding. My great expectations had come from a hunted man. whose life could end if he was discovered. After the shock settled in my heart over the days, my thoughts turned to the man who had come to me in the storm, Magwitch. He slept in my rooms, exhausted from travel and years of hardship, but even in his sleep he looked hunted. I watched him breathe, slowly, painfully, with the weight of his life heavy upon him. Whatever I had once believed about gentlemen, wealth, and destiny, none of it mattered as much as the fact that this man had crossed oceans and risked death just to see the boy who once brought him a piece of bread in the fog. He had come back for me. And now I had to protect him. London was dangerous for him. It was the very place where he could be caught and condemned. So Herbert and I knew we could not let him stay there long. We moved him quietly to a small, hidden lodging near the river, a place where the water touched the steps and the sound of passing boats covered all other sound. There, Magwitch waited patiently, hopefully, always looking toward the faint trace of sky through the small window. Our plan was simple, though it required patience and timing. We would watch the tides. When the right tide came, we would take him downriver in a small boat, moving quietly among the fishermen and barges. If we could slip past the river police, we could reach the open sea. And from the sea, passage to freedom. It was a narrow chance, but it was a chance. During this time, Magwitch spoke often of his life. He told me of the cruelty he had known, the labor, the hunger, the punishments, and of the wild hope that the thought of me had given him. He said my name the way a man might say, "Home." But each day, I saw the danger growing around us. We noticed faces watching the river. We heard footsteps where footsteps should not be. Someone else knew that Magwitch had returned. Herbert and I stayed close to him, and in the quiet nights, while lamps flickered across the black water, we waited for the tide that might give us escape. During all this chaos, news of Estella's marriage reached me like a cold wind. She had married Bentley Drummle, a man of wealth but without kindness, without gentleness, without heart. I felt no anger toward her, only sorrow. Sorrow for myself, and sorrow for her, because I knew she had never been taught how to love. Miss Havisham had shaped her into something beautiful to look at, but untouchable, unreachable, a heart sealed shut so tightly it could not feel its own beating. A few days after receiving the news of Estella's marriage and also knowing about Magwitch, the secret benefactor behind my education, I went to Miss Havisham to seek understanding, and she, worn down by regret and the weight of her own bitterness, asked me for forgiveness. As she reached towards me, her ancient wedding dress caught the fire of the candle, and though I threw myself upon the flames and others came to help, she was terribly burned. She lived for a short time afterwards, quiet and sorrowful, and then she died in that silent house where time had once stopped. Her death passed like the closing of a long and painful story. After I reached London, the night came when the tide was right. The air was still. The river glowed under the moon, a quiet, silver path stretching forward. Herbert and I helped Magwitch into the small boat. He gripped my hand with a look of hope so deep it hurt to see. We rowed slowly, moving among the shadows of the larger boats, doing everything to look ordinary, unnoticed. But just as we reached the part of the river where the water widened, a boat slid out from behind a barge. Voices called out. Oars splashed hard. A figure stood with a lantern that cut across the river like a blade. They had been watching us. A sudden shout. "There he is! Magwitch! Stop that boat!" Magwitch straightened, his face calm, almost peaceful. And then another man stood in the opposing boat, a man from Magwitch's past, a man filled with hatred. It was Compayson, the very man who once betrayed Magwitch and left him to suffer alone. The two men saw each other, and in that moment, the river held its breath. Magwitch moved before words could be spoken. He leapt toward Compeyson, and the two crashed into the water. The river swirled, dark and violent. There was a struggle, a brief, desperate clash of arms and shadows. Then the water closed over them. Compeyson did not rise again. Magwitch surfaced, gasping, wounded, dragged bleeding back into our boat by the police. His hands, the same strong hands that once held a stolen crust of bread, were now in chains. He was once again taken to the prison. It was during the long, heavy days while Magwitch lay in prison awaiting trials that the truth of Estella's birth came to me. I had gone to Mr. Jaggers with the hope of pleading for Magwitch's life, though I knew in my heart that there was little chance of mercy. Jaggers sat at his desk as he always did, calm, sharp-eyed, untouched by the sorrow of any man, and as he spoke of the case, a look passed between him and Wemmick that stirred a memory I could not quite place or understand. I asked him then quietly that why did he mention Molly, his housekeeper, with Magwitch's case. And there, in his precise, unbroken manner, he told me the story of Molly's trial for murder, of how he had defended her and saved her from the gallows, and of how there had once been a child, a baby girl, taken from her to ensure her silence and her obedience. As he spoke, the pieces began to gather in my mind, one fitting into the next with dreadful clarity. The child taken, the child raised by Miss Havisham, the child shaped to be beautiful but unfeeling, the child who had stood before me all my life as the center of my great longing was none other than Estella, Magwitch's and Molly's daughter. When I understood that Estella was Magwitch's daughter, the daughter of the man who had given everything to make me a gentleman, and the daughter of the woman who had lived in Mr. Jaggers' shadowed house, I felt as if the world had turned within me. She, whom I had loved as though she were made of starlight and distance, had been born into pain just as I had, and neither of us had belonged to the proud world I once dreamed of. I loved her no less for knowing it. Only the pride in my love fell away, and something gentler and truer took its place. In all these months of trials, I used to visit Magwitch daily. He was wounded, exhausted, and chained once more, the same way I had first seen him when I was only a boy on the marshes. But now I no longer saw a criminal. I saw a man who had lived his whole life in darkness and had carried one small, warm memory with him. The memory of a frightened child who brought him food and kindness. The guards looked at him with suspicion. The magistrates spoke to him with coldness. But when I came into the room, his face softened. He would lift his hand, always slow now, and rest it over mine. "You're a gentleman," he would say quietly. "Not by coat nor boots, but here." And he would press his hand to his heart. The trial came. There was no hope of mercy. Magwitch had returned to England illegally, and the law did not forgive that. He was sentenced to death. But his body was already failing. He had little time. I sat beside him in the last days, in a small stone cell where the light from the high window fell like pale water. I told him the truth that mattered most. "Your daughter lives. She grew up beautiful, and I have loved her all my life." Magwitch closed his eyes, and a calm, gentle peace passed across his face. He whispered, "God kept her. I'm content." His hand was still in mine when his breathing slowed, grew faint, and finally stopped. He died quietly. Not in fear. Not in chains in his heart. But with love inside him, for the first time. I bowed my head and kissed his hand. It was the death of a father, though neither of us had ever spoken the word. After Magwitch died, my own fortune vanished. Everything I had once owned, once expected, once assumed to be mine, was gone. Death found me. Exhaustion pulled me down. I grew sick, weak, too weak to stand. I remember only fragments. A room, a fever, a slow fading of the world. When I opened my eyes again, Joe was there. The same Joe who had hammered iron in the forge, who had helped me when I was small, who had never once stopped loving me, even when I turned my heart away. He wiped my forehead gently with a cloth. He spoke in a low, warm voice. He paid every debt I owed. He asked for nothing in return. I cried when I realized everything he had done. He only smiled and said, "Ever the best of friends, Pip." His kindness broke my pride far more deeply than any shame had ever done. When I recovered, I returned to the forge, but the house felt strangely quiet, as though a voice that had once filled every corner had gone out of it. Joe met me at the door with gentle eyes, and Biddy stood beside him with folded hands. It was then I learned that Mrs. Joe had passed away, her long suffering finally at an end, and all the sharpness that once defined her gone like a sound fading into silence. I thought, perhaps, I might still find happiness there. I thought of Biddy, gentle, kind Biddy, who had always understood me better than I understood myself. I walked to the forge with a hopeful heart. But Biddy was already married. She had married Joe. And when I saw them together, peaceful, simple, full of quiet love, something inside me finally let go. The jealousy, the longing, the pride, the ambitious dream of being someone more than I was. I told them both that I was happy for them, and for the first time in my life, I truly meant it. After spending some time with Joe and Biddy, I left again, but not to chase dreams this time. I left to work. After all the expectations had fallen away and the life I had once imagined for myself had dissolved, I began again quietly, with no wealth behind me and no dream of greatness before me. Through Herbert's help, I obtained humble work with Clarriker and Company, a merchant and shipping firm, where I learned the business of trade from the ground up. The work was steady, honest, and sometimes difficult, but it was work I could respect. Over time, through patience and effort, I earned enough trust to become a partner in the firm. There was no sudden fortune, no grand rise, only a slow and steady rebuilding of my life. And in that simple, honest work, I found a peace that all my life I couldn't find. Years went by. And then, one quiet evening, I returned to where everything began. Sada's house. The gates were broken now. The windows empty. The walls crumbled. The house of stopped clocks had fallen silent forever. I walked through what remained, a place of ashes, dust, and memories. And there, in the fading light, Estella stood. She was changed too. There were lines of sadness on her face, not from age, but from living in a marriage without love. Estella's proud marriage brought her no happiness. Her husband, Drummel, treated her with the same coldness she gave to everyone. In time, he died, leaving Estella a widow, and life at last began to soften the edges of her heart. Life at last had taught Estella how to feel. She looked at me with soft, tired eyes and said, "I have been bent and broken, Pip, but I hope into a better shape." We walked through what remained of the garden, where once she had made me feel small, and where I had once believed destiny tied us together. We did not speak of love. We did not speak of promises. We simply walked, side by side, like two people who had suffered, learned, grown, and humbled from life's experiences. The evening air was still. The world around us was quiet. And as we walked forward together, past the broken walls and the silent garden, I felt no bitterness, only peace. Whether we remained together or drifted apart again is not the part that matters. What mattered is that, at last, we understood one another. And in that understanding, there was a kind of home.